This episode of Midco Sports Magazine is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Hello, welcome again to Midco Sports Magazine, and three more great stories this month to warm your heart and inspire you as we get into these cold days of winter. Stories about people who just get it done, no matter what the odds and no matter what the obstacles. And we start with a story of a marathon and an amazing friendship and how two people can figuratively and literally push each other to the finish line.
Sometimes your shadow is all the company you need. When you run, most of the time, it's all you get.
It is just you and the pavement and your shoes out there, and that's pretty much what it is.
Chris Riley credits a former coach at Sioux Falls, Washington High School for helping uncover his love for running. He competed for the Warriors, then at Mount Marty College in Yankton, where he also earned a degree in history education in 2012. It was shortly thereafter that Riley took a job as a teacher and coach in Belle Fourche, South Dakota, and he's now working to instill the same passion in a new generation of Harriers. Coaching and the classroom keep him plenty busy, but Riley always makes time to find some pavement and just go.
It's a great time to kind of let your thoughts just wander. That's something I really enjoy, a few times a week at least, going on nice long runs.
Nearly 400 miles away, there's a 14-year-old boy that also loves to run. His wheelchair suggests he can't. Then again, there's been a lot of things that people have tried to tell Carl Madsen he couldn't do.
We have a saying in our family, there's a German word, spelled D-O-C-H, and it's pronounced doch. And doch is a word that is multi-purpose, so it can mean either a gentle corrective, I think you're wrong, or as I've often said in adult language, how could you possibly think such a thing?
Carl is in that chair because of the traumatic brain injury he suffered in a car pedestrian accident that occurred just before his third birthday. His father, Bill Conning, who'd been walking across the street with Carl in his arms, didn't survive. It's been since that day that Carl and the rest of the Madsen family have mastered the art of joyful defiance.
If I ask Carl, when the doctors said that you would never walk again or never talk again or never make any mischief again, what did I say to those docs? And he will say, doch, doch, doch.
This story's two main characters, the runner and the kid who likes to live beyond his perceived limitations, first met a few years ago at Outlaw Ranch, which is a camp run by Lutherans Outdoors in South Dakota. Chris and Carl hit it off immediately.
Yeah, there is a limitation because of the wheelchair, but that's just a physical thing, and inside of that, he's just like any other young teenage boy, wants to be active, wants to have fun. I see more joy in Carl than I see in probably 95% of people that are completely able-bodied and can do whatever they want to do.
Carl made such an impact on Riley that he decided to find a way to strengthen their bond. And for him, there was one very natural, albeit complicated, vehicle.
I was familiar with Team Hoyt out of the Boston area, that the dad would do triathlons and Ironmans and marathons and all kinds of stuff with his son, who was limited mobility. And I think the quote was something like, that's when he feels like he has no disability, is when they're out running together or when they're out competing and doing those things. So I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool to do sometime, because you can get kind of caught up in the competition of races all the time, and sometimes you kind of lose the whole reason you got into running. I just thought it'd be fun to see if Carl would be interested in something like that. I thought it was something we could do. It
was a testimony to the kind of guy he is when out of the blue, last year he called and he said, so this is what I've been thinking about. Would Carl be in or not?
He's doing what? It was kind of just shock at first, and then as it began to sink in, it just became like this just happy, life-giving thing. Like, this is just really, really cool for him to do this for Carl.
At the time, it wasn't much more than an idea. Riley admits he didn't really have a plan. He hadn't sought permission from event organizers or trained for those special circumstances. He and Carl would just show up and run the Sioux Falls Half Marathon together. When the day finally came, the run went off without a hitch. And Carl? Well, he had a blast.
He was smiling the whole time, huge grin on his face.
And Chris actually got a pretty darn good time, even with that. And he'd never done a wheelchair or never raced ever, not even a trial with a wheelchair before. So this was his first time.
Riley says he knew right away that once would never be enough. That passion he worked so hard to bring out of his able-bodied athletes was pouring out of Carl. So it wasn't long after that first race was over that plans to go bigger were put into motion.
Thought, well, might as well up the ante a little bit and see if he wants to do a full.
So, nearly a year to the day of their first run, Chris and Carl returned to the starting line. A couple of things were different, most notably Carl's wheels. Unlike last year's standard wheelchair, this time he'd be running in style in a specially designed chair that had been provided by a local business. When the gun sounded, off they went, and that gleeful smile returned to Carl's face. It stayed there for the next few hours as the tandem wound their way around Sioux Falls. Random strangers, even fellow competitors, urged them on, but no one cheered louder than Carl's family. The team of Madsen and Riley finished the 2015 Sioux Falls Marathon in 3 hours, 48 minutes, and 36 seconds, a pace of 8:43 per mile, which Riley says is faster than his first solo marathon. It was also 89th best out of 306 runners. But the results never mattered. This was so much bigger. It was about helping Carl defy, joyfully, those who couldn't look past his limitations. Today, Carl, in his own way, is just another runner. And that's all the reward Riley ever needed.
You just can't help but feel good about teaming up like that and doing something together and the pride of that accomplishment.
And joined now by Jay Elson. And if that was the end of the story right there, incredible story. Is that the end, or are they going to try to keep doing something else?
Well, I don't think we know for sure, but I know that Chris has already indicated that he's willing to keep going and maybe travel to some of the bigger events, try those out, go other places to do what they've done here in Sioux Falls the last couple of years. He's in it for Carl, and that's what it's about to him. So if Carl really wants to do it, I think Chris is willing to do whatever it takes. Now, it might be a little more complicated going forward just for the fact that Carl's mom has recently accepted a job in Omaha and the family will be moving there shortly, but he's already been willing to travel across the state to get this done. I'm sure a couple more hours will be no big deal.
All right, very cool. Nice work. Thanks, Jay. Well, up next, you could call it getting a foot in the door for all of her fellow females. We will kick down some traditional gender barriers when we come back.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine, and a couple of football stories now. Rachael Evans is a multi-sport athlete. She has played on her college volleyball team. She's played on her college basketball team, but it was a different sport, this one, that brought her from her home state of Texas to Minnesota. Here's Carla Metz with the story.
In football, rules, regulations, and traditions are talked about as much as the actual plays. But there's one unspoken belief that can block some from even getting the chance to play on the same field. Minnesota West number 3 knows that barrier all too well.
I'm Rachael Evans. I'm from Godley, Texas, and I'm currently at Minnesota West.
Rachael Evans is a college football player.
I went to Godley High School, and I was a kicker my junior and senior year, and that's just where it all got started. I was the trainer for the football team, and then our kicker graduated, and our coaches knew I had played soccer. So they were like, you know how to kick a football? I mean, they were always messing with me, so I was like, no, I don't. Stop kidding around. They're like, no, really. So I just kind of started going out after practice and kicking, and then I went to some camps like Baylor and Kick Nation and started kicking all the time, and then finally I went out and tried out, and they're like, okay, you actually have a shot at this.
Learning to kick in high school was not enough, though. She had to prove herself as a football player, and that didn't come without adversity.
It was pretty rough at first.
I wasn't really accepted by the team, obviously, because in Texas football is everything and you don't want a girl out there. It's a man's sport. So I just had to really get the respect from my teammates. And that took a while, but then they were pretty good, and when they saw that I would make my field goals, they were like, okay, she's in this for real.
Her perseverance to push through and prove others wrong would become well worth it by the end of her junior season when she kicked the game-winning point.
I wasn't nervous or anything. I just went out there, did my thing, kicked it, made it, and then my whole team swamped me. And I was like, what's going on? And the crowd was going crazy. Everybody was so excited or shoving me around. That was probably the best part, was just everybody together in the middle of the field going crazy.
Although Rachael isn't the first female to play football, she was the first female to play in a Texas high school all-star game. It was there that she realized playing at the collegiate level was an option.
From there, a recruiter picked me up. He's like, you have potential. I just watched you kick all these balls and you're just as good as the boys. I was like, okay, And so during the summer, I really hadn't planned on going to play football. He called me, he's like, I have all these colleges interested in you. And I was like, what? Like, for what? He's like, football. And I was like, oh.
She was then introduced to the head coach of the Minnesota West Blue Jays, Jeff Linder.
Somebody coming back. We have to stay home, all right?
I just got word about Rachael, and we were looking for an extra point, a field goal kicker, and so one of my former players got a hold of me and said, you got to take a look at this gal. She's really, really good, and I don't know that she's getting the opportunities she should.
After Coach Linder saw Rachael's footage, he was sold on the Texas All-Star.
I knew, we wanted her because she can kick. My instincts told me that she's a football player.
Rachael doesn't just sit on the sideline until her number is called. She's involved in the game. She speaks the language.
She helps signal in offensive formations for me, so she's right next to me along with the backup quarterback. And I want her involved in what's going on other than just, okay, it's time for a field goal or extra point.
She's impressed her teammates and coaches, but she's also caught the attention of small, impressionable eyes in the stands.
My 8-year-old is absolutely impressed with Rachael. She wants to play football next year. She asked Dad if I would sign her up, and she's had me out in the yard, teaching her how to kick. I think that inspiration for young ladies, knowing that I can do this too, is very, very important.
In a sport where being a female might be looked at as a disadvantage, number 3 is kicking her way to change the unspoken rule in football, all as a way to create an opportunity for other girls that want a chance to lace up their cleats like every other player.
I just want them to see it is okay to hang out with guys, it is okay to play sports with them. They're gonna treat you the same. Maybe not at first, but if you respect them, they're gonna respect you, and really just go and do it. Don't second guess yourself just because somebody says, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this, so why are you out here? Go out there and do it anyways. Who cares what people say? I don't want to live with what ifs. Like, what if I hadn't have done this or this or this, so I'm doing it. I'm living it.
Joined by Carla Metz. And all right, Minnesota West is a 2-year school, so if Rachael wants to keep going to school and keep playing football, what's next? She's got to go somewhere else. Right?
Yeah, she's looking at a couple of different 4-year programs. I know she'd like to be closer to home, which means that's closer to Texas, but she's open to any opportunity at the chance to continue her football career.
All right, very cool. Thanks, Carla. Up next on Midco Sports Magazine, age is not the only thing that makes Hank Goff a veteran, a man who served his country and then found football again.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine, and the story now of Hank Goff. He is a defensive end at Concordia-St. Paul, a Division II team that plays in the Northern Sun Conference. Goff is a senior on the roster this year, but he's coming up on 30 years old. He's had an incredible journey that has started with football and has taken him back now to football. David Brown has his story.
There's no sunlight to be seen on this dreary morning, but Hank Goff is certainly shining. After all, he's got it made in the shade, getting a day off from practice while watching his teammates get after it.
They know, it takes a couple more days for me to recover from, these young guys. They're out there back out in one day. It takes me a couple days, so you know, they all they call me old and everything, but they all appreciate it. They know why I'm there.
Hank still takes the time to help the rest of his teammates perfect their technique during this morning practice, and they should really listen to him, because most of these kids were in grade school when Hank first started his college career. Hank Goff is 28 years old.
It's like I have 100 little brothers. You know, I'm just like, what are you even talking about? So, you know, I'm cooler than most of my older friends because I know what's going on in 18-year-old world, but...
College football is supposed to be where boys become men. Hank Goff became a man long before enrolling at Concordia-St. Paul. A highly recruited prospect out of the Twin Cities, Hank chose to attend South Dakota State in 2005 and made an immediate impact.
Hank was a phenomenal athlete for his size, unbelievable potential.
His leadership on the field was never in question. Off the field, however, it never added up.
I didn't go to class. I didn't do homework. I thought I was bigger than life, you know.
We always mentor young men. We check their classes. When they fall short, we reprimand them. We hold them accountable. But bottom line is, we're not going to walk a guy to class.
I was 18 and I just didn't listen to anyone. I wasn't taking care of the school side of it. No one could tell me anything, and I was just blowing my shot at playing D1, and eventually I did.
Hank left South Dakota State after his freshman year and had no idea what to do next.
I wasn't hanging out with the best crowd. I wasn't making the best decisions. One morning I kind of woke up and I was like, God, I'm a loser. So I went out and thought of the hardest thing I could do, so I went out and joined the Marine Corps.
If Hank thought his college coaches and professors were tough, he was in for a whole new ballgame.
I went to boot camp, and that was a culture shock. My first letter home to my mom said, "Dear Mom, I'm sorry I was ever 18."
After what Hank describes as 3 straight months of just getting screamed at, he went to infantry training to become a machine gunner. Soon after that, he was deployed to Afghanistan.
My unit was the first unit in Afghanistan since '01, so it was kind of like the Wild Wild West when we were there. I was pretty much the suppressing fire for my squad, so if we got into a firefight, I would suppress and the other guys would maneuver.
Hank and his unit left Afghanistan after 9 months, and after 3 more years, including a non-combat tour in the South Pacific, he decided it was time to move on from the Marines. But while the actual war overseas may have stopped for Hank, the war at home was just beginning.
There's a big epidemic in the veteran community right now, suicide. So we're all looking out for each other. I think I've lost upwards of over 45 people between suicide, like motorcycle accidents, and like KIAs. We've lost about over 45 people. I've lost just as many guys to suicide as I did in Afghanistan.
The adjustment back home, coupled with the continued loss of his closest friends, left Hank right where he started after he left SDSU.
My head was just not ready. It's a culture shock. You come home from somewhere where they tell you to do every single thing, how to do it, when to do it, how fast to do it. And then I came home like, oh, this is fun. I can do whatever I want now. So I had a lot of fun for a year, and then after that first year, that's when the suicide started coming up and everything, and my mom got sick, and it was just a brutal year. And then that's when I was like, you know what, I got to do something. So I decided I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to try to play football.
Hank landed at Concordia-St. Paul in the fall of 2013 with 3 years of football eligibility remaining. It's a campus just 30 minutes from where he grew up.
Hank's a great football player, and he's an even better person. And that's the best way to describe it. His positive characteristics, honestly, are endless. With his maturity and his life experience, and it's just experience that you can't buy. It's awesome.
I can't lie. I treat Hank Goff differently than I treat everybody else. And I feel like that's the best way that Hank is going to be able to do what he is capable of doing.
The age gap between Hank and his teammates is always a source of humor among the Golden Bears, but they're well aware of what he's experienced.
What he's gone through is a cakewalk compared to college football, and it's good for these kids to know that You might be hurting now, but it could be a lot worse.
A lot of these kids are like me, I had to learn the hard way, but I always tell them, like, this is what's gonna happen. Whether they listen to me, that's on them,
Hank's first season of college football was 2005. His last season will be 2015. Bookends to a decade filled with stats. Over 20 tackles for loss on the football field, and more than twice that lost on the battlefield. The game of football and the game of life often lead to war metaphors or cliches. And while Hank says those comparisons don't bother him, the idea of camaraderie and always having people in your corner is why the sun will always shine for Hank, even on the cloudiest of days.
His amount of loyalty to those guys that he fought with and the guys that he plays with, Hank Goff is one of those guys that's not playing for Hank Goff. Hank Goff is playing for the guys that can't do what he's able to do.
I hurt every single day, but it shows me what I know what I'm made of. Like I was up for 3 days, firefight. If I got to run conditioning, like, oh well, suck it up, Hank. It's not that bad. This is fun.
Hank went the wrong direction, but the goal is that you plant some seeds, good seeds, and eventually they figure out what's the best way to live their life, and that's why my heart's warm.
Football saved my life. I was not going the right way. It did save my life. It gave me a purpose.
And joined by David Brown, and that is an incredible story. Nice job, and all that he has accomplished and done for our country. And now he's going to be done with football finally, right? What does he want to do next?
Yep, this is his senior season, so he's going to be done with his playing career. What he wants to do is he wants to get into coaching. You sort of saw in the piece he's already sort of a student coach, if you will, to some of his younger teammates. He's asked to be a grad assistant at Concordia next year. Remains to be seen if he'll actually get that position. But if he doesn't get involved in coaching, what he wants to do is actually become a firefighter. And the common theme seems to be whether it's football or the Marines, when he's among a group of guys trying to accomplish one goal, that's where he thrives the best.
Very cool. Thanks a lot, David Brown. Thanks to everybody for their involvement in this month's episode. You can see these stories and all stories from the past on YouTube. Thanks for watching Midco Sports Magazine.
This has been Midco Sports Magazine, presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.